Hello everybody, Flyaway Jay here and welcome to another flight on my Walker Air Transport Nordics tour. This is flight 19 of 50, which will take us from the unique and beautiful Isafjordur Airport in the north of Iceland all the way down to Reykjavík in the south. Today we're going to be flying the WB-Sim C172, carrying 3 souls on board, made up of 2 passengers and 1 crew. Fuel today is 130 kilograms and a payload of 245 kilograms, which gives us a total weight, total takeoff weight of 1,142 kilograms. It's quite close to max takeoff weight for this aircraft, but we should be okay. As always, using live weather, you can see or potentially even hear how fast the wind is blowing in this area. As you can see, we've got the aircraft tied down. Hull covers are in the engine intakes, which we'll remove shortly. There's quite a strong wind blowing almost straight down the runway on takeoff at 18 knots, gusting to about 28 knots, so it might get a bit bumpy until we get above these mountains on the left and the right of us. This airport is located in a bit of a valley in a fjord, so it will be very bumpy until we start routing south towards Reykjavík. Once we reach Reykjavík, ceiling and visibility should be okay when we land there on runway 13. So hopefully it's a bit smoother once we touch down. For those of you that watched my previous video, arriving into Isafjordur Airport last night, it was quite windy. One of the most windiest landings I've ever done at any airport. The gusts were incredible. The airspeed was jumping 30 knots at a time, going from 60 to 90 on the approach. Managed to touch down quite fine actually. I didn't do too much of a hard bump. If I did in this aircraft, the WB-Sim C172 actually does show that type of damage. I've got the realism set on, so damage to the aircraft is recorded, and this aircraft is almost like a living, breathing aircraft as you would have in real life. I'm not sponsored by WB-Sim. I bought this aircraft with my own money, and must say it's been worth every cent so far. Without further ado, let's get the aircraft set up for startup. So first things first, let's jump in the cockpit. Alright, we've got our convenient headlamp on, brightens up the inside of the aircraft. What I want to do first for this WB-Sim aircraft is just to turn on this little device over here, which is normally the ADF radio, but if you click on the screen, what you would have is access to the WB-Sim menu. You'll remove the tie downs, remove the cowl plugs, and remove the pitot cover. So when we jump back outside, everything is been removed. Aircraft is pretty much ready for startup, which we will do right now. Okay, back to normal. Turn all of these things off again. Okay, first things first, make sure the parking brake is set with the amount of wind blowing today. We don't want to be rolling anywhere. Fuel selector valve should be on both. Fuel shut-off valve, let's push that in so we can get the fuel flowing. Because it's quite cold, I'm actually going to add a little bit extra fuel and push the throttle slightly more in. Mixture for now is going to be idle cutoff. Let's turn the masters on, alternator and battery. You can slowly start hearing the instruments spinning up, gyroscopic instruments. Beacon we can turn on to just let people know this aircraft is about to go live. And what we've got is our lovely red light at the top, indicating that this aircraft's about to start up. Now, in order to prime this aircraft, what we'll do is we'll have the fuel pump on until we see some sort of amount of fuel flow established on this indicator here. What we'll do is we'll just increase the mixture until we see that fuel flow, and there you can just see a tiny little amount of movement. Once we've got that, we'll take the mixture back to idle cutoff and then turn the fuel pump back off. There should be some fuel in the engine, and that should help us with the startup in this cold -4 degree environment that we're about to start up in. What we need to look out also for is the draw on the battery. So we look at that, that's our current battery voltage. Okay, we're pretty much ready to start the engine. So how we do that is we're just going to turn the key and slowly advance the mixture to increase the fuel flow to the engine. So let's do that. And there we have it. Mixture is full rich. I'm going to set the RPM to 1200 just to let the aircraft warm up a bit. Okay, what we need to look out for now is temperatures and pressures are in the green. But the oil pressure is good, all temperature is very cold, fuel is looking good, there's fuel flow, battery is charging, you can see the voltage is increasing, and the vacuum is working for all the instruments that require that. Alright, we might as well get the before taxi checklist done. What we need to do now, navigation lights go on, taxi lights go on, avionics master switch goes on, so we can make sure our route is all set. We've preloaded the route that we're going to follow, but let's actually just have a quick look here. Obviously from where we are, we're not going to be following that. So what we'll do is we'll just set up a departure. That looks good. ISAC 1A departure, so we'll enter that. Runway 8, correct. And we'll load that up. And we'll deal with the arrival once we get a bit closer, but importantly now, that's what we need to have. Let's set up the autopilot quickly. Just want to see what the pressures are. 1020 is correct. So we'll set that. Right, that button over there. Squawk, we'll squawk 2000 for this. I'm going to set that to standby for now. What I will do is just turn on the cabin lights so we can see a bit better. There we go. Alright. We're going to be climbing to 6,000 feet today. All temperatures still very low, but that's okay. Avionics are set up. All good. Although we're not flying on VATSIM today, what we will do is set the radios to that frequency. There's no controller at the moment, so it's 122.8. And 8 over there. Perfect. There's our map set up. We'll see how we're going to route. Going to definitely hand fly this aircraft for the most part out of this airport just because of how bumpy it's going to get. Autopilot will only come on when it's safe. Altimeter, let's set that to 1002. This is the local pressure. Pitot heat, because there is icing and snow, I'm going to turn that on. Flaps will only set once we get onto the runway, just to avoid us bouncing around and potentially damaging the flaps on the taxi. Elevator we set for takeoff, which should be roughly there. Flight controls, let's have a look at that quickly. Full left, full right, all the way back, full left, all the way down, full right. Flight controls are free and correct. Alright. And let's lean the mixture slightly to prevent fouling on the engine. So look for that drop. And it should be about there. We'll set it. The WB-Sim Charlie 172 actually does have a fouling indicator for the realism. So, quite a cool feature. Perfect. I think we're ready for taxi. We're taking off on runway 08 today. So what that means is at this airport, unfortunately, there is no taxiway beside the runway. So what we're going to do is we're going to taxi straight out to the right onto the runway, and pretty much where we are, we'll be able to just as soon as we enter the runway, turn right, and that should have us. Give us enough distance to take off. So without further ado, let's do that. Parking brake off. Add some throttle. Oh, you can see the wind is already pushing us around. It's actually quite disconcerting. You can see the snow blowing sideways. But luckily, from a takeoff perspective, it's going to be fine. Gonna test the brakes quickly. Brakes are good. Just check the indicator, the direction indicators are working. Yep, we're acting normally. Compass is working. Artificial horizon is level. Interestingly, this little airport has a little ramp, so it's a little uphill to get onto this apron. There's the taxi line over here. I'm actually going to try and keep the nose slightly into the wind so that we don't struggle to turn into it again. Here's the taxiway, and you can see there's quite a drop to get down onto the runway. Whoop. There we go. We're slipping down the ice. Our rudder is fully deflected. Okay. Not sure why I'm getting these disconnect issues that happened here yesterday too. Okay, let's stop here. What we'll do is just turn the parking brake off while we get ready for departure. Set the RPM to 1200 again. Okay, before takeoff checks, strobe lights go on, landing lights go on. Flaps, I will set one stage of flaps. Mixture, I'm going to set full rich. Fuel selector remains on both. Avionics are set up and correct. And what that also requires is that we set the transponder to altitude. Let's give it a little run up and just quickly have a look to see if we can generate all that power we need. Okay, up to 2400 RPM. You can see that wind is affecting the prop. 2400 RPM is good. Let's do a mag check quickly. Slight drop. Back to full power. Left. Drop. Back to full power. Gonna lean the mixture quickly just to see if that has an effect that we're looking for. There's the drop. Back to full. Alright, power check is good. Back to idle. Aircraft is idling good. Back to 1200. Interestingly, the oil temperature is still very cold. Cabin air is good. Cabin heat is on so that we don't freeze inside here. Alright, aircraft is set up. No issues. Temperatures and pressures are still green. Fuel flow is good. Waiting for the cabin attendant to assist finish the briefing. Okay, here we go. Parking brake goes off and slowly advance the throttle. That wind is really fighting us here. Okay. Power set. Looking for 60 knots to rotate. Going to be climbing out at 74. Temperatures and pressures are still looking good. Airspeed's alive. There's 60 knots. Gently pull back on the yoke. And we're up. Tap the brakes. Power set. Mixture set. And we're just going to follow those red lights away from this hill. Okay, just trying to balance the aircraft. Quite windy. It's quite a short takeoff, as we expected, with the wind blowing directly down the runway, giving us some extra airspeed. Still full throttle on the climb. There's a little town. Just want to keep that climb going. As you can see, it's quite bumpy. Laps can come up. Okay. There's 1,000 feet. Landing light can come off. Just going to be following that magenta line, which will take us into the bay, and then we can round this this mountain on the right hand side of us. We are flying quite close to it, but luckily the wind is not coming from over it, it's coming from the left hand side. From 030. And just see some icing starting to form on the windshield. Should be okay. We're not expecting icing conditions really, but I just want to be aware of it. Whoop. Into the frozen bay. Okay, we're clear of this mountain on the right, so what I'll do is I'll just turn on the autopilot. I'm at roughly 500-600 feet, and we'll hit nav mode. Okay. Aircraft is now in control on autopilot. Got a good climb. Probably increase the climb rate somewhat to about 700 just to bring that speed slightly down. Seems to be climbing really well today. And that's where we just came from. Taxi light can go off too. Just trying to stay up. Show why the aircraft is fighting that so hectically. It might be wind. Actually just going to decrease the rate of climb a little bit, get us back onto the magenta line. Almost at 4,000 feet. Very windy. Very bumpy. Alright, we're on our way. Aircraft is working nicely. Intercepted the magenta line. Autopilot is doing well. As you can see, much better than yesterday with the sunrise. You can actually see a bit more today. The sunrise hours are very short at this time of year in Iceland. I think the sun only comes up at about officially at 12 o'clock and goes down about 2:30, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So we've only got about a 3-hour gap of daylight. Other than that, just waiting to get a little bit further south so we can be clear of this inclement weather. Battery's looking good, charging well. You can see the aircraft is really fighting to stay on course here. But as soon as we route south, we're going to have quite a bit of tailwind to get us where we need to be. At the moment you can see our airspeed's about 100, ground speed 77. But the wind is coming out of this direction 030. So when we headed south, we're going to have quite a big tailwind component helping us get down south. All temperature's good. 1,000 feet to go. Fortunately, I think we'll be in a bit of cloud for a little while, but after that, skies should clear up. I'm going to keep the pitot heat on just in case. We're climbing a bit faster than we need to, or we shouldn't in reality be climbing at about 74 knots. But for the purposes of this flight, I think it's just more important to get out of this area and up and away from these very high mountains around the airport. We should be starting our turn to the south very shortly. And then with that, we'll have a nice tailwind. Just note the ground speed as we turn into to fly with the wind behind us. Beautiful. This game is just incredible from a... Sorry, the simulator is very incredible from a visual perspective. Went from 80 knots ground speed to 120, which is really fast for a little Cessna. Still very bumpy, but we are rocketing at this point. I'm gonna bring the RPM down a little bit, down to 2400 RPM. And with that, adjust the mixture. As I'm adjusting the mixture, you can see the fuel flow coming back a little bit, bringing us into a more economical phase of flight, saving some fuel and extending our range. – 2400 RPM, 120 knots, not doing too bad. This is a very bumpy flat. Hopefully it calms down as we go down. But the weather forecast did say. But let's see how we go. Okay, 2400 RPM, fuel flows nicely reduced. Give us a good speed to economy ratio, 2400 RPM. The 75% of power is about 2600 or 2700 at this altitude. And what that roughly gives us is 500 nautical miles or 4.5 hours endurance. Quite significant. If we drop the power down to 45%, which is 2200 RPM, we can extend that range by another 100 nautical miles or 2 hours worth of flying. That's with full tanks, obviously. For this aircraft, what we want to do, how you know how far you have to lean the engine is you want to have peak EGT, which is indicated by that red line. So you pretty much want that indicator as close as possible to the red line and at your correct speed, and that means you are pretty much correctly leaned out on your mixture. So we're doing quite good there. And any fuel flow within the green arc is good. Let's have another look at outside. So this aircraft actually equipped with the ski modification. So if you want to see how that works, basically what it is I think you just hit this and the skis actually retract down underneath the wheels, means you can land in snow. Useful for these parts of the world, but for landing on a runway, that's definitely not what you want. Setting the route directly for Reykjavik. Just look at that scenery. Really something special to behold. Gonna come back slightly on that power. 2400 RPM. I think we've only got a few more miles to go before we clear of all this cloud, and then it should be relatively smooth sailing. Nice thing though is we've got that extra tailwind helping us along. Quite beautiful scenery. I've actually got the Orbex Iceland mesh installed, giving you accurate elevations and layouts for this part of the world. And also the Iceland overhaul pack from FlatSim.2, both of which are free products. Highly recommend them. Definitely adds some finer details to this beautiful scenery. That together with the actual world update, which is the Nordics. Very beautiful part of the world to fly in. Just gonna lean this in just so we can get that peak EGT. There we go. Yep, once we're through these clouds, we should be straight on the way down to Reykjavik. Just gonna zoom out slightly so we can see. We've got a ways to go. Let's have a look on what the WB-Sim says about this aircraft. No fouling, engine health 100%. I'm not sure why the oil level is not indicating here. Pretty sure it did say something. Or maybe it's only when you're on the ground does it read. And the rest of the time you have to actually rely on the aircraft itself. Oil pressure does look good. It's on the higher end, so we're good. Very bumpy ride, sulfur, but I think, as you can see ahead of us, clear skies. Outside air temperature currently minus 18 degrees. You can see the aircraft is fighting with some winds again. Some interesting facts about the Isafjordur town that we just left. The town centre is actually located on a spit of sand, and in a fjord. It's got a population of roughly 2,600 inhabitants, and it's the largest settlement in the peninsula of Isafjordur. Inhabited since roughly the 9th century. So it's got quite a bit of history. Believe it or not, this tiny little town has a university called the University Centre of the West Fjords, and it offers a couple of master's degree programs: coastal and marine management, Icelandic language, coastal communities and regional development, and marine innovation. Obviously, an area like that was highly dependent on sort of the marine ecosystems for its potentially trade and whatever else. So these types of towns will be built around anything to do with the marine life. Probably fishing, lots of fisheries up in Iceland. Potentially some tourism. Seems like a very beautiful place. And forgive me if I'm pronouncing the names badly. I'm trying my best, but I obviously can't guarantee anything correct. If you're from Iceland, feel free to comment. Anything interesting or useful I could know about Iceland. I'd really love to visit it one day. As far as our trip is going, everything seems to be fine. Gonna keep the pitot heat on just in case. I think once we're in this clear area here, I'll turn it off. It'll significantly help the battery draw and the charge of the battery. 27.7 volts is fine. But so far so good. One of the cool things about this aircraft is that it saves your state, and that means the hubs that you've flown the aircraft for. So the hubs is pretty much just a pure measure of time on the aircraft. It's when the engine is running, which obviously differs from the TAC, which is this one down here, and this one down here is actually dependent on the speed of the engine. So an hour on the hubs doesn't necessarily translate into an hour on the TAC meter. In older aircraft there was fairly significant. I'm not sure why this one is still completely accurate, but maybe it's because, you know, I've only flown it for 1.8 hours. Maybe as we go further we'll start seeing a difference between that, these two measures. What I mean by that is if you're idling the aircraft, the TAC runs slower than when you're at full speed, such as in a climb. Okay, we're looking good from a icing perspective, so I'm actually going to turn the pitot heat off. You can see as we're flying south there's a lot less snow. Actually see some patches of ground, which is welcome. The last two flights have been very snowy and icy. You can actually see some water. So for those of you that are wondering, in a Charlie 172, the pitot tube is this thing over here, and that measures the airspeed of the aircraft as it's flying through the air. What happens is, if you're flying through icing conditions, the risk is that this would get blocked up here, and that prevents the air from actually flowing into this little tube, and that means that your airspeed indicator basically either freezes in place or it drops off completely because there's no pressure on it. Just going to add some throttle to get the RPM back up to 2400. Speaking of airspeed, and just manage that EGT a little bit better, bring that down, and we're good. It's going to lean her out to peak. There we go. EGT is leaned out to peak. I'm slightly back on the throttle. There we go. Hopefully none of the passengers are prone to air sickness, because this is definitely a very, very bumpy ride. I think one of the next products that I'm going to be looking at purchasing is FS Realistic. At the moment, not using much from a add-on perspective. This WB-Sim Charlie 172 obviously being one of those add-ons. But FS Realistic, I've seen some good reviews. Drop a comment below if you have any thoughts about it. Also like and subscribe if you enjoy what I'm doing. And also let me know if you want to fly with me. Happy to do a flight and let you know my next route. Be nice to have some company in the skies with me. Just about to go 1 o'clock here in Iceland. UTC and local time is the same here in Iceland at the moment. I'm not sure if they have daylight savings time. Wow, she is really fighting this wind. This goes to show how well Asobo has modeled the weather. The interaction between flight surfaces and the wind is quite incredible. Even yesterday when I landed at Isafjordur, the wind was blowing so strongly down the runway that the aircraft didn't have enough, or in fact the surfaces were being pushed on so much that it couldn't actually turn on the ground. I actually had to use a bit of momentum to try and get her turned around, but it was some seriously significant winds. And that interaction with the wind and the aircraft was actually quite noticeable in the sim. And for those of you who fly X-Plane, I also see that X-Plane 12 has finally gone into the release version. It's no longer in beta. X-Plane also being a very, very competent sim. Also have many, many hours in X-Plane. I think the one thing that Asobo has done really well in Microsoft Flight Simulator is the streaming of the tiles of the scenery. whereas X-Plane has gone more for an auto-generated scenery. Difference there being that what you see in a Sobo or in Microsoft Flight Simulator is a satellite image, whereas in X-Plane it's not a satellite image, it's just sort of a representation of what the typical scenery of that area looks like. Obviously you can add things that sort of improve the look of X-Plane, which I have done. Like Ortho for XP allows you to import those tiles and sort of manually generate these the same sort of scenery that you see with Asobo and Microsoft Flight Simulator. Really helps with the immersion. Effectively, if you do import the ortho tiles into X-Plane, the sims do look very similar. I think with Microsoft Flight Simulator it's just a little bit easier to do that, not requiring you to actually download and create all of these tiles yourself. I think MSFS just out the box is really beautiful and ready to go. Trying to think what else I've added to Microsoft Flight Simulator. Okay, and obviously VATSIM. VATSIM is super useful. A great tool and system to use if you want to fly with other pilots under air traffic control. So a nice little bit of detail is if you look at the fuel tanks, with the aircraft being thrown around a bit, you can actually see how the fuel in the fuel tank is shifting around, affecting the measurement of it. Pretty good. Everything else looks pretty good. Autopilot managing the trim. Let's have a look at the map. Where is it? It's over here. That's where we headed, BIRK. Actually got an NDB. Let's see if we can tune into that 355.0. I'm missing something here. Not quite sure what's up there. Let's have a quick look again. Not sure why that's not cooperating. That's very odd. Seems like the ADF is actually active. Another cool feature about the WB-Sim is this ELT. Give it a test. ELT stands for the Emergency Locator Transmitter. In the event of an accident or a crash, you can activate that and it basically sends out a signal for search and rescue to come and find you. Another cool feature about this aircraft is that the circuit breakers actually do work. Let's see what happens. Where's the transponder? It's over there. We can actually pop it and you can see the transponder turns off. Push it back in and it turns back on. Normally as a pilot you'll run your fingers across here just to make sure that these things are not popped and are all fine. So for those of you wondering what a transponder is, it's this device down here. And what it basically does is it sends this code here from your plane so that ATC radar can identify you. They use that to determine your speed, altitude, direction. And basically what it does is it allows them to better manage the aircraft. So in theory, what they'll do is you'll file a flight plan. You'll then get allocated a squawk code, which you'll type in there. And on the radars, they'll see this number. And they can link that to a flight plan. They'll also ask you to ident, which pretty much makes your radar signature on their screens pop up, and they can quickly see where you are and who they're speaking to. There's a number of different settings on the transponder. Those are off standby test on an alt. So with alt selected, it actually broadcasts to the radar what your actual altitude is. Standby doesn't do that, but it just shows the ATC that you are there. Otherwise, what they'll have to rely on is pretty much just a signature of the radar bouncing off your aircraft, which isn't anywhere near as detailed as the information that they get from something like a transponder. Set that back to 2000. All different regions have different standard squawk codes. Some regions have 2000, some have 1200. For Intrasec, let's see what it is in Iceland. There's really quite a cool guide for flying VFR in Iceland. The Icelandic Transport Authority actually provides quite a nice simplified manual about what you need to know about flying VFR. Just want to quickly see if I can find what that standard squawk code is for this area. They actually make quite clear mention of the winds in Iceland. So it's obviously quite a thing. Also, just while we're flying here, gonna set to the standard pressure 1023. Yep, I think in Iceland it is Squawk 2000, uncontrolled. So I'm going to leave it on 2000. Very, very windy still, but much better. Actually coming quite close to Reykjavik. According to this, we should be there in about 21 minutes. 43 miles to go. Fuel levels are looking great. VGT is looking good. Fuel flow is great. Everything's fine over here. Every now and again you just want to do a scan of the cockpit just to make sure you're still okay. Particularly your engine speed and your airspeed, just to monitor it. And just generally if you're flying in icing conditions or cold conditions, just checking sort of the tips of your wings for any ice buildup. It's generally where it builds up is sort of on those parts of the aircraft. Man, what a beautiful flight. And thank you for joining me. I know we cover a lot of distance on these types of trips, but you know, it's part of seeing the world, part of using the Walker Air Transport tour system. You get to fly to really nice places, get to build up some hours, get to experience and learn these aircraft, and just generally have a great time. And to be honest, I really appreciate what Asobo and Microsoft has done for flight simulation. It's really made it very accessible. I use a PC, but you know, if you've got an Xbox, you can fly it. It's generally creating more interest in aviation in all parts of the world by making it more accessible. Aviation is in reality a very expensive hobby, and this allows us to experience that thrill of flying for a lot less. And in a very real way. You know, these systems and simulators are modeled using real world systems, tools, designs. These aircraft react and work in the same way. And if you've got sort of nice control kit like rudder pedals, throttle quadrants, and yokes, it really does feel like the real thing. And even being able to fly with a Microsoft controller makes a real difference. Just going to adjust this direction indicator as best I can. You can see there's some drift which occurs as we fly. That's about as close as we're going to get in this bumpy weather. Also, a really great tool that you should check out if you want to keep a track of all your flights around the world is Volanta. It's a free application from Orbex. Basically, almost like a flight log. Tracks your flights, your aircraft, how many hours you've done, where you've flown. Also provides you with useful information like the weather, temperatures and pressures. Also shows other aircraft flying in the areas, whether they are reflected in Microsoft Flight Simulator or not. It's platform independent, so there are aircraft from Microsoft, from X-Plane, people using BIIS, Pilot Edge, whatever. They can be shown on this map for everyone using Volanta to track their live flights. Definitely check it out. It's free after all. Also for those of you who like doing very long flights, you know, the 8, 10, 12 hour flights, you can also monitor your flights remotely. I think that is paid though if you download the app on your telephone, your cell phone, but still a very useful feature to have. Sun hanging very low in the sky. But just look at that. This game is a thing of beauty. Still got quite a significant tailwind. This GNS 530 actually has a little indicator here which shows you what the wind component is that you're dealing with. What I'm also going to just quickly do is select an approach for us. Sorry, me no arrival. Let's deal with the approach. See what we can get. Localizer 13Y, that's correct. Concision. See what we got. No, that shouldn't have happened. I'm gonna activate that again to keep us on track. Make sure nav is still active. Not sure why I can't select the proper frequency. RPM is good, fuel flow is good, airspeed is fine, fuel is good, EGT is good, temperatures and pressures, vacuum, and the battery is charging. We're doing fine. Still very cold, 14 degrees outside, minus 14 degrees outside. Alrighty. Gonna try and get that glare out of our eyes. Had the cabin heats pulled all the way. Just trying to keep some warmth in this aircraft. $25 miles to run. Just want to double check. Engine 2 looks right. Engine 2 in actually looks perfect. We'll come over the bay. Oh no, wait, not right. We're not going for runway 19. Skirt. Localizer 13. Yep. Correct. Okay. Select approach. Select arrival. That doesn't help us. I don't have my charts with me, so bit of a guessing game to see which one we're going to take. Let's quickly see. Nope. 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 UN. Still not. Nope. Ira. Possibly. Nope. Not that. Finger. Nope. Okay, looks like the runway we've chosen, 13, is a visual only runway, so that's fine. We're just going to go direct and fly a VFR entry. I should have Navigraph up and running in the new year. So 2 new things to look forward to, Navigraph and FS Reality. Nine minutes to go. I'm going to start our descent at about 6 minutes to run, about 10 nautical miles. 1,000 foot per minute. What I'd like to do is set my heading bug to the runway direction. That's always just a quick reference to see which way the runway is lined up. It's really quite bumpy still. Hopefully the landing is a little bit better. Still squawking 2000. Scenery here in Iceland really is something beautiful. Hopefully my passengers are okay. Haven't had any complaints so far. Gonna have to start my descent in a little bit. Looking for 1,000 foot per minute. Autopilot really working hard to keep this aircraft at altitude and on track. There we can see basically where the airport is roughly. Just going to go into manual heading so that the aircraft can give us some space to line up and descend in time for the approach. I want to make sure that we hit the glide slope at about 1,000 foot above sea level. Give us a nice opportunity to space ourselves out nicely enough for the left-hand turn into runway 13. Where I'm aiming for a visual reference is sort of that tip of the island and that land behind it. So for VFR flying, you always want to have a reference on the ground that you can point the nose towards, and that's what I'm going to use in this case. Set the autopilot for the descent. Select 1,000 foot per minute. Coming back on the throttle just to reduce that speed. Looking for 100 knots in the descent. Landing lights can come on. Set to the local pressure, in this case 1020. RPM looks good, fuel is on, mixture can come full rich. Alright, nicely set up for the descent. Just want to maintain that 100 knots. Still slightly bumpy, but nothing like what we saw on the departure. The nose still pointing at those two visual references with the airport on the left. Going to be a nice smooth left-hand turn. I'll let the autopilot do some of it just to get us lined up, and then I'll take over. Gonna just try and see if there's an approach that we can use. Don't think so. Even though it's listed, it doesn't seem to do much on the VNS 530. Not a problem though. We'll be doing a VFR visual approach. I'll be hand flying the aircraft in. Perfect weather for it, and it'll probably be nice to keep the eyes outside the cockpit for this landing. Just want to round it around that little tip on the left there. Sun's still hanging very low. Some nice smooth air for a change, no bumping. Just having a look around the cockpit, making sure that we've got everything ready for the landing. All the exterior lights are on, that need to be on. Mixture full rich, fuel is correct and flowing. You can see we've got about half a tank left of fuel on each side. More than enough if we had to divert somewhere else. Speed is a little fast, but it's okay, we'll lose that once we level off. Coming back a little bit on the throttle. Okay, let's initiate the turn towards the runway. 1,000 above the autopilot altitude that's set, and now you can start seeing the airport coming up just in front of us. (1,700 foot). There's the runway over there. And looking for that white arc before we drop any stage of flaps. The white arc represents the speed at which you can safely drop the flaps. Autopilot coming off. Going to start hand flying the aircraft now. That warning indicates that you have now got control. 1,200 above the 1,000 foot circuit height. This airport obviously being at sea level, so we're 1,000 foot above the runway. There we are, just within the white arc. It's now safe to, or almost safe to, drop the first stage of flaps. A little bit of gust. There we go, first stage of flaps. This will give us a bit of a more nose down angle so we can have a better sight of what we are approaching of the airport. Speed is looking good. Just trim the aircraft out. Looking for 70 knots in the descent, touching down at hopefully around 60 knots. These gusts do make it a slightly difficult to land. Adds a bit of extra airspeed as you're trying to land. So you run the risk of ballooning a little bit. You just have to manage that with a bit of power. Or not. You just kind of manage it with power, reducing and increasing as necessary. Slight stutter coming in. But overall the PC is performing perfectly. Don't want to drop too low below the 1,000 level. Airspeed is looking good. Just keeping an eye on those PAPI lights. Should be 2 white and 2 red. Dropping another stage of flaps. Slowing the aircraft down a little bit, providing a little bit more lift. Looking good so far. Just got to try and stay on that glide slope. Airspeed is good. Aircraft is set up. Just maintaining that glide slope. Just keep trimming the aircraft to make sure we managing that glide slope good. That's the last stage of flaps. Might be a little bit more than what we need in this case. Just concerned about the winds. Airspeed still looking good, 70 knots. So far so good. Light stuttering starting. Obviously the scenery is taking its toll on my graphics card. It's adding some power, dropping a little bit slow. A little bit low in the glide slope, but we should be fine. Good on the glide slope. And now just managing that power. Coming back on the power. And now we just try and hold it off. Hold it off. Hold it off. No stall warning yet. Holding it. Okay. Fairly firm landing, but we're okay. Any landing you can walk away is a good one. But I think as landings go, that was actually not too bad. Clean up the aircraft, flaps go up. Just going to route towards those hangars with the red doors. There's a taxiway down there. Just going to exit at that point. Just need to manage the contaminated runway. Don't want to go too fast, causes a risk of slipping. Going to turn off all the unnecessary things. Landing lights can come off. Flaps are up. Set the transponder to standby. Okay, adding some power just so that we can get off the runway. Just going to slow down and take this taxiway. Just need to hold short here and we can finally clean up the aircraft. Hit 1200 RPM, or 1000 in this case, should be fine. Okay. Taxi lights can come on. And I'm going to park in front of these hangars on the right here. Just going to double check. Yep, that's the one. This is where she's going to be stored overnight in preparation of our next flight. Might not be this aircraft, as I say. Drop a comment in the comment section below if you can suggest what I should fly next, all the way from Iceland to Norway. It's a long section over the coast, and likely going to use some sort of a jet, fly nice and high, fly nice and fast, or something with a long enough range to get us from Iceland to Norway. Alright, this should be fine. Maybe get a little bit closer, but it should be okay. Parking brake goes on. Lights can come off. Beacon can stay on. Avionics come off. Mixture all the way back. Full lean. Ignition off. Battery off. And that's it. You can see my frame rates are suffering a little bit, but nothing too bad. And there you have it, guys. Welcome to Reykjavík. Thank you so much for flying with me. You're welcome to fly with me at one point. Just drop me a message in the comments and we can arrange a date and time to fly together. Just want to set up the aircraft for storage overnight using the WB-Sim interface. That's using the ADF radio. Just get that turned on. Click the screen. Get a bit closer there. See what we can do. Everything turned on. And you can see the aircraft is perfectly ready to be stored overnight. Should be fine. Tie downs. Like I said, thank you so much for flying with me. Really appreciate it. If you like what I do, like and subscribe. Drop a comment. Tell me what we can do better. But the point of this is to learn, to share the joy of aviation, and just to have a good time, generally speaking. Just make sure everything is locked up. Don't think they've simulated the doors on this aircraft. But what a beauty. Good flight, good times. And there we have it. All the way from Isafjordur to Reykjavík. Thanks for flying with me. Flyway J is out. Peace.